How y'all doing? I'm trying something I don't normally try. I don't normally do a live on YouTube. I've done it on TikTok a number of times. It gets a little crazy when I do it on TikTok. There's so many people in the Trumplefucks and all that sort of thing. Lila says hi. Hello, Lila. Thank you for joining me on the live on YouTube. Got a lot of stuff going on. It's a Friday night. I'm sitting here. I'm doing nothing. I thought, what the fuck? We'll come out here on YouTube Live and see how it goes. Donetta says, hello from Iowa, our neighbor to the south. Hello, Donetta. Thank you very much. Got a lot of stuff to come about. Got Kim from Kentucky. We're getting it all across to the nation. That's the one thing I really love about YouTube, TikTok, and the like. You know, back when I worked in radio, you dealt with a small area of people. Here we could talk to people all around the country or throughout the world for that matter. We've got Sean coming in. Hello. Karen from upstate New York and Jose from Florida. Debbie from Ontario. Just about broken. Thanks, Boomer. Love your shows. BC, Canada here. Good to see you. Are you going to chat about the rapist making the money so he can now fight the E. Jean Carroll case? Yeah, we can talk about that. We should, and Carrie from PA, hey, how you doing? A lot of people are wondering how Donald Trump ended up coming up with the money to post his bond, $91 million, $91.6 million in the E. Jean Carroll case. And I was a little surprised by that. And then I started thinking about how he may have done that, but turns out I was wrong again. Donald Trump literally had till Monday to post this $91 million bond. And if he hadn't, E. Jean Carroll's lawyer would then proceed to start the process of seizing and liquidating his property. Okay. So he was scrambling. He didn't want that to happen. Obviously, that's terribly embarrassing. And that's the one thing that Donald Trump does not like to be. He doesn't like to be embarrassed. That, in fact, that's the worst thing that can happen to a narcissist. So anyway, he gets this money and he posts it. Now, a lot of people thought it was Elon Musk. They thought it was Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Thought it might be Vladimir Putin, and it was none of that. No, none of those folks gave him any money, even though he did spend some time talking to Elon Musk. Bob from Ecuador. Hey, Bob. Anyway, turns out what happened, he did get an insurance company to post the bond for him. He got the insurance company to post the bond. Now, that's interesting because he needs some kind of collateral in order to do that. And somehow, some way, he put together enough collateral, his properties, anything that's unencumbered. And when I say that, I mean doesn't have a mortgage on it, that he owns free and clear. And somehow he was able to pull together at least $90 million. Chances are he has to pay a premium on that. So he probably had to get a little bit more than that when it was all said and done. So they post the bond. This company loans Donald Trump the money, which is a little crazy, little fucking crazy. Lila says the insurance company is tied to Russia. That could be. I don't know. I know this company is called Federal Insurance. It's tied to a bigger company called Chubb, which we've all heard of. Whether there's a tie to Russia, Lila, if you know something, please enlighten us, because I don't know that. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying I don't know that. But here's the deal with Donald Trump. He is all about delaying the inevitable. He was worried about E. Jean Carroll's lawyer going in and liquidating his property. Well, now he has to put up his property in order to get this bond so he can make his appeal. Now, if he doesn't win the appeal, and he most likely won't win the appeal, then E. Jean Carroll and her lawyer will just take that fucking money, and the people that put the money up for him are going to want to get paid back somehow. Donald Trump won't have the cash for $91 million. So what's going to happen? They're going to seize his properties and liquidate it. See what I mean? He just puts off the inevitable. It's all going to come down that way, but he thinks if you can put it off for a day or two or a week or a month or a year, that somehow he'll come up with some magical answer and fix all. But over the last 3 years, we've seen him dealing with the shit he's dealing with. Every time he appeals, he loses. And the thing about it is that's the least of his problems right now, because while he's got this bond posted, in 2 weeks, he's got to post another bond close to $500 million. Do you think Chubb's going to do that? I don't think so. And then the next day, he's got to go on trial for 34 criminal charges. It's going to be a bad week or so when that comes around in 2 weeks. Sean says, I'm really surprised that Chubb wrote the bond for the Orange Man. Yeah, I'm surprised too. He probably had to promise a lot more than the 91 million because he's a hell of a risk. There's no way they're getting their cash back. Donald Trump's going to appeal this case. He's going to lose, and then that money's gone. Donald Trump won't have the money to pay back the company, and they'll have to go in and grab his shit and start selling it. Lila says, I've been going down the rabbit hole. Apparently, this company has ties to Russia. We'll hear more in the coming days, no doubt. Yeah, that's the one thing you have to be careful of, Lila, is that not everything you hear on the internet is true. There's a lot of bullshit out there. I'm not saying this isn't true. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all if there's a Russian tie. Leslie says he's broke. He's never had that amount of money he's claimed. I'm enjoying watching him go down. Yeah, me too. I mean, just by virtue of the business he's in, it's not likely any folks that are in that business would have a lot of cash. All the money they have would be invested in properties because that's their business. And then the other part of it is he highly leverages those businesses. So he doesn't have a lot of equity and puts it in other business. It's like a big fucking pyramid scheme. Sean says, Sean says, what are the Russian ties? And I asked Lila that, and she says we'll hear more about that soon enough. And I'm sure we will. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of interesting things about Donald Trump's access to money. Is it somebody who just did him a solid, or is it somebody who actually got some collateral and is going to want it back as soon as this appeal fails? So Donald Trump is maybe breathing a little easier right now because E. Jean Carroll's lawyer won't be grabbing his shit, but it's only put it off temporarily. And it's going to be a different story with the $500 million that he's going to have to put up. It's going to be totally different. I don't know that an insurance company is going to risk $500 million. The question is, too, does Donald Trump even have enough property to warrant covering $500 million? I doubt it. And when that happens, things are going to get a little ugly. He's going to be a little busy, too, because he's preparing for and then ultimately going into a criminal trial in the Manhattan district. Now, I know we've seen him in court in the civil cases, but what you have to understand about this is civil cases, he had a choice as to whether he'd go in or not. He doesn't have a choice in a criminal trial. He's got to be there every day. If that thing goes for 2.5, 3 months, he's got to be in there every day. He's like an ADHD kid. He's not going to be able to sit still. And he's not going to be able to shut up. And again, because it's a criminal trial, there's a much there's a big difference between being in the criminal trial and being in a civil trial. Civil is about fines and money and that sort of thing. So when he got out of hand and he was talking shit, they fined him, and they were afraid to really do much of anything. But when you're in a criminal trial, especially when you have a judge like Juan Marchand, well, they're not just going to let it go. The first thing Judge Marchand would go to is getting him out of the building and putting him in jail. That's what they're going to do. So Donald Trump is going to have to be on some serious drugs, or he's going to have to listen to somebody for once, because doing what he did in the civil court and the criminal court, just not a good thing. It's not a wise choice. He's not going to do well if he does that sort of thing. I want to remind folks too, it's not up yet, but it'll be available. I have a podcast, the Rational Boomer podcast. You can get the audio version, or here on YouTube. If you watched it, you know what I'm talking about with the Rational Boomer podcast. I had the good fortune of having Ed on the show with me. For those of you that don't know who Ed is, Ed's quite a professional. I've known him for 25, 30 years. He and I spent a number of years on the air together. So when we work together, feels like home, and it's very easy. He's very knowledgeable. He knows a lot of things. And as I tell people, the key to having guests on are to make sure that you have guests that are smarter than you. Ed, Old Soul, Eric, all of them all have some insights that I don't have, and it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to pull them on the show and offer them up in the podcast. But we have a new podcast coming out at about just after midnight Central Time, and be sure to check that out, the Rational Boomer podcast. If you want just the audio, you can go to rationalboomer.com, and there's all kinds of links to TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and to the audio podcast. So it's real easy to find. So I'm curious as to, I'm sitting here, I'm 63 years old, sitting in my living room Friday night. I'm not out partying and going clubbing. But what are all you folks sitting around watching YouTube for? Are you so caught up in the news of the day, or are you like me, just kind of taking it easy and sliding into the weekend, as opposed to what we used to do and party from Friday to Sunday, and then go back to work or school or whatever? I'm retired, so every day's fucking Saturday to me. I don't know. What did you think about the State of the Union? I thought that was very interesting. And I was a little nervous about it too, because, Joe is 81 years old and he is slowing down. Certainly uh, uh, um, nothing like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is flat out losing it. Leslie says, I'm 65 and I don't have cable. I'm with you, man. I just do all the streaming shit too. Um, but apparently, Joe Biden was pretty prepared to do this State of the Union. It was quite impressive. It was probably one of the best State of the Unions I've seen, and I'm old, so I've seen a few. But Joe came prepared. He knew what he was going to say, and he ad-libbed a number of times. So the guy's still pretty sharp. He's still pretty sharp, and he did a hell of a job, I think. Um, when he called out the uh, Supreme Court, I thought that was particularly interesting. He was talking about Roe v. Wade and how shameful it was and how powerful women are. And then he looked at the Supreme Court and he says, you're going to find out how powerful the women are in this country. And then, this is something I've always said. We can talk about the criminal trials. We can talk about all the noise in the air about all the crimes and corruption that Donald Trump committed. But if nothing else happens, the fact that the Republicans overturned Roe v. Wade and Donald Trump embraces it and takes credit for it, that's enough for him to lose the election and the Republicans to lose the election. You're taking away constitutional rights away from half of the country, women. You're pissing off 75% of the country who supports Roe v. Wade. Please tell me how that is a recipe for a winning election, a winning campaign. It's just not. Carrie says, I'll be 66 on the 20th and I can't stand cable. Biden was great in the State of the Union, in my opinion. Lila says, my dad is 85, the smartest, sharpest guy I know. I'm not worried at all about Joe Biden. And Karen Barrett says, retired as well. Every day is Saturday. Love Biden's address. Now, for you younger folks, I got to tell you, being retired is great, to be honest. But you got to have something to do. My wife has a part-time job at an airline, so we can fly wherever we want for cheap or free. I might have been lazy enough just to sit on the couch and watch TV all day, but I got an itch that I needed to scratch, and that's why, with my background in radio, it was easy for me to get on TikTok and ultimately do the podcast. So that, well, I'm going to fucking do it. And somebody asked me, is it a drudgery doing the TikToks every day and doing a podcast every day? It's really not, because I have the choice. And I don't have anybody telling me how I should do it, when I should do it, or what I can't do. Having that freedom makes it real easy to sit down and do this sort of thing, or do the podcast, or do TikToks. So I'm having a good time with it. And one of the most gratifying things about doing it is I know there's a lot of people that are very nervous about what's going on. There's a lot of anxiety, people not sleeping, people not eating, and that troubles me. I mean, the important thing you got to remember is you really can't worry about things you can't control, but you still should do whatever you can to do your part. People say, "What do you think, you're going to change the world by doing TikToks and podcasts?" No, I don't. But if I can put out the word and have some people hear it, and then they hear it and they put it out and then they put it out, we can start a kind of a groundswell, a grassroots type thing of people talking about the truth as opposed to the bullshit that we normally hear. It's something. It's something. At least when I on my deathbed and my granddaughter says, "What did you do back to in that fucked up era?" I can say, "Well, I tried. I tried." Now, Lila says, what has shocked me is how many Republican women are good with losing their autonomy. That pisses me off more than the men. I agree with you. It's amazing. One of the most disturbing things I found since Donald Trump became president, with the resurgent or the insurgence of the Trumplafucks, is I never imagined how many stupid people there were in this country. People that will vote against their own self-interest. And when Lila was talking about the women, that's especially true. I don't understand that. If someone told men that they couldn't do something with their body, there would be outrage. There would be trouble of all kinds. So I don't, I don't know what to expect out of this, but I do believe that when the election comes in November, it is going to be overwhelming for Joe Biden. The Republicans have done nothing since 2020 to increase their support or get more votes. Joe Biden has done quite a lot. I don't know if you heard the recent report about the jobs report. Uh, in February, 275,000 more jobs were created by Joe Biden. That's putting him close to 16 million jobs since he took office 3.5 years ago. You know what Donald Trump's figures are? In his 4 years as president of the United States, he was minus 2.5 million. He lost 2.5 million jobs while he was in office. The only president to do that. So when you make that comparison, it isn't hard to tell who's competent and who's incompetent. David says, I have a sister that's all MAGA and I can't even talk to her. She's so far down that hole. I'm with you, man. I have a sister who's the same way and has a husband who's even worse. I haven't talked to them in probably 2-3 years, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not going to listen to their shit and not say something back, and they have a problem with that. So cool. Paige says, ditto, Lila. My dad is the same age as Biden. Same physical and mental capability as Biden too. I'm not worried either. They make 80 look strong and wise, and my dad is still working too. Well, kudos to him. Jose says, representative from Alabama made a fool of herself. Yes, she did. What was her name? Katie Britt. She's a freshman Republican senator from Alabama. She was picked to give the response to Joe Biden's State of the Union. Honestly, I think she was more of a sacrificial lamb. I think they knew that whoever they put up after Joe Biden spoke was going to have trouble, was not going to do well. So they took the new girl, put her up there, and wow. At best, I would call her amateurish. She came in, she told a lot of lies. She beat the same drum that Donald Trump beats, and then she threw in some phony um, emotions and crying and stuff, and it was just kind of sickening. And this woman, I don't know who she is or what she's like, but she's getting her ass kicked right now by people thinking she's a joke. And frankly, it's because she's a joke. And she's one of these Stepford wives type women that are willing to give up their autonomy for whatever they believe the Bible tells them. Lila says, exactly. Our autonomy is just the start. Joe Biden isn't perfect. However, he's done a hell of a job considering all the roadblocks. Lila said, oh my God, she's so cringe. Didn't get past me. She was in the kitchen. Yeah, she was in the kitchen. I don't know if she was barefoot and pregnant, but she was definitely in the kitchen. I mean, that's the thing that's so surprising. And I think Ed and I talked about it on the podcast. I was born in 1960, and you have to understand that women came a long way since 1960. It doesn't seem that long ago. But back in the 60s, there was a lot of things women couldn't do. They couldn't have a credit card. They couldn't buy a car without a man. They couldn't buy a house without a man. They were not they were not really able to work. Certainly couldn't make any money, and uh, the husbands back in the day preferred they didn't work. I know my mom didn't work; it was just my father. And and David says, I remember the Big Now movement. Yeah, there was a big women's movement in the 60s and 70s. There were a lot of movements: civil rights movement, anti-war movement, and women's rights. You know, it's funny about women's rights. Back in the day, they wanted to pass something called an Equal Rights Amendment. So all of us are equal, men and women. Seems easy enough. They passed it through the House and the Senate. Then it had to pass in a certain number of states. This was 40, 50 years ago. And you know what? To date, that Equal Rights Amendment has not been passed as yet. There is no Equal Rights Amendment in the Constitution at this point. So David calls it the good old ERA. Yeah, that was big news back in the day. And I know women were fighting real hard to get it passed, but to no avail. And that the reason it didn't pass in all the states probably is the precursor for the Trumplafucks. Same kind of mentality, same kind of redneck, misogynistic, anti-Semitic, and racist fucks. You know, um, you have to remember back in the 60s and 70s, it was okay to be racist. It was okay to call these people names or treat them differently. And it was okay to um, diminish women, to grope them, or to pay them less money, and all these sorts of things. It was okay back then. It was accepted, and that's the problem. And it wasn't that long ago. It's not like it's back in ancient times. It's back in the 60s and 70s. Thankfully, we've come some distance from that time, but certainly not far enough. And it's because of people, honestly, of my era, the boomer era. Now, I'm one of the younger boomers. I'm closer to Gen X, but I am, in fact, a boomer. But there are a lot of old boomers that still live in the old world. And they think that um, if you're not an old white man, you ain't worth shit. That's what they believe. And that's unfortunate. David brings up how women back in the day, I think it was the 70s, where the women looking for equal rights, they would burn their bras. That'd be all over the fucking TikTok, wouldn't it? Page says the rebuttal took women back 75 years. This is not how the average working mom would speak or act. She was not talking to us, nor won over any of us. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I don't know why they know what they're talking about doesn't work, yet they still fucking do it. I don't get it. I don't understand why they keep embracing it if it doesn't work. It's going to do nothing but work against them once they get to November. They're going to lose horribly because of their treatment and their thoughts on women and bodily autonomy and Roe v. Wade. That in itself is enough to cost them the election. You know, they did it prior to the 2022 midterms, and they honestly believe that women will, oh, they'll get over it. They'll get over it. Well, women didn't get over it in 2022, and they got a whooping. They thought there'd be a red wave, and that was the furthest thing from the truth. Now, maybe they think they'll forget about it in 2024. If you believe a woman is going to forget that, then you've never dated or been married to a woman. I've been married 40 years, and I know that my woman can go back and mind the 80s and 90s and pick out every little thing I did wrong and pull it back to the surface if need be. Um, but that's what the Republicans want to do. They want us to go back in time, and they want us to go back to the 60s and 70s where white men were king and everybody else just bowed and scraped to them. And as an old white man, you'd think I'd be for it, but I'm not. I have a wife, I have a granddaughter. And when I leave this world, I want to make sure they're okay and they have the things that they need and the world to live in that they deserve, as opposed to what these Trumplafucks want. It's absolutely ridiculous. Um, Dan, the man, says pink hats are a reminder. Yeah, they are. Um, Women are still fighting to this day, and I support them. There shouldn't be anybody in this country that is shorted on rights, regardless of gender, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of color. All of that is just aesthetics. Deep down, in the heart of hearts, we are all just people. And why we can't treat everybody just like people, I don't fucking get it. Now, Paige said, agreed, Mike. When October rolls around, women will get loud and proud. Right now, we are all busy with full lives outside the kitchen. Yeah, absolutely. You know that, and that's the funny thing about Joe Biden. He really stepped it up in this State of the Union address. He went after Donald Trump. He went after the Republicans. He went after the Supreme Court. This was much different than we normally see out of Joe. And I think Joe was kind of pacing himself. He didn't want to start too early on this track because people forget. And he wanted to be able to keep it up and maintain that pace leading up to the election. And I think that's what we're going to see and how it's going to be different. Joe's going to be loud. I think he made a campaign stop earlier today, and he was speaking up. If for no other reason, he should sense how he was received in that State of the Union and just replicate it and keep pounding on them. We got to learn a lesson from the Republicans. This is what they do. They say something, whether it be true or false, and they keep saying it, and ultimately their base will believe it. I think one of the most troubling things about that, though, is if they keep repeating it, some Democrats believe it too. There are people out there in the Democratic Party that are fatalistic. Oh, Donald Trump's going to win and we're going to lose democracy. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It's not in the fucking cards. But it's important that Joe Biden, the Democrats, and all of us here on YouTube, on TikTok, whatever, keep talking loud and proud and keep talking about the facts and exposing these fucks for the shit they do. David says, I was so glad he was loud and only a couple of stumbles he came right back from. David says he freaked out Hannity. Well, I didn't see how Fox reacted, but I can imagine it wasn't good. But yeah, he stumbled. I mean, let's be honest. He did an hour and a half talk. That's not easy for anybody who's 35, let alone 81. And he has a stuttering problem. He was very clear, very cognizant. He was very strong and very inspirational. And he gave us some hope. You notice the difference between Joe Biden and that woman who made the response. The woman from the Republican Party did what Republicans always do. Everything they talk about is based in fear and the horrors that might come. They feel like they have to scare people in order to get them to vote for them. It's kind of like Donald Trump saying, oh, it's going to be horrible unless you vote for me because only I can fix it. That's something the whole Republican Party does. But if you look at Joe Biden, there's a lot of positivity, a lot of hope. And I think if anything in this country we need more of, it's hope. This constant fatalistic attitude that all is lost and nothing's going to work and Donald Trump won't be held accountable. First of all, it's a bunch of bullshit. Donald Trump had to post $91 million bond to appeal a case where he was held accountable. Letitia James is going to hit him up with $500 million that held him accountable. And he's going into a criminal trial on March 25th because he's being held accountable. Cindy says, Dark Brandon needed to be present last night. Was his time to shine with the entire world watching. And David says, damn right he did. He did. He rose to the occasion. He did what he needed to do. And now he needs to continue to do it. And I don't have any reason to believe that he won't. I'm sure he will. And I'm sure all the other Democrats will start speaking loud. I mean, what you got to understand, you got to have a bit of a killer instinct. And I don't mean that literally. But we basically have the Republicans on the run. They lose at every turn. They're losing appeals. They're losing elections. So now that we have them on the run, we have to make sure that we run them down and put them down permanently. What I mean by that is vote them the fuck out of Congress. We need Joe Biden in the White House. We need the majority in the House and the majority in the Senate so we can finally get some things done. And I thought it was interesting when Joe looked at the Supreme Court and kind of scolded them. What the Supreme Court has to understand is they fucked up the election for the Republicans. And when the Republicans get kicked out and the Democrats take power, one of the first things they're going to look at is the Supreme Court. Because let's be honest, if we don't have a trusted Supreme Court, it's really hard to have any kind of democracy in this country. As soon as the Democrats take over, the first thing they need to do is codify Roe v. Wade. Get that fucking thing done. That should have been done a long time ago, and it needs to be done now. Secondly, we need to address the Supreme Court. We can try to impeach some of them. I don't know that will work. We can try to expand the court, which is really what we should do. I mean, the court has 9 justices because at the time when there were 9 justices sat, there were 9 circuit courts. Now there's 14 circuit court. It only makes sense that we have 14 judges. Or 13 judges, I'm sorry. 4 more judges is what we need. And if we could do that, then we could balance the power there and maybe get some semblance of sanity back into the Supreme Court and kind of marginalize these criminal, corrupt motherfuckers that are already in there. Lila says, we've all been abused by narcissists. Some of us realize this, many don't. Yeah. I think most people have been affected by a narcissist. I think I've told the story many times before. I had a father who was a narcissist, who was actually like a mini Donald Trump. He made a fair amount of money, and that's what he lived on. That was his identity, and that made him more important than everybody else. And that's why I maybe had such a hard-on for Donald Trump. When I saw him and when he took office, I recognized the personality. I live with that personality. I know how a personality like that starts. I know how it goes when he's at his peak, and I know how it ends. I know how it ends. It always ends in a spiral and a crash. You know, my father was very successful in business. He was quite a narcissist. He had quite a temper, and it came to a point, after abusing my mom and being verbally abusive to his kids and stuff, it came to a point where nobody was talking to him anymore. Nobody from his family. And you know what? He didn't care. because he only really cared about himself. But the end comes for everybody. His business was no more because computers changed that business. He was getting older. He ended up living on Social Security. When he died, he was living in a one bedroom apartment in northern Minnesota, sparsely furnished. He died sitting in a reclining chair in his underwear, alone. And that's how it usually ends for these fucks. Not very pretty. It doesn't end well for them. And that's how it's going to end for Donald Trump, without question. I have no question in my mind that that's how it's going to play out for Donald Trump. David says they need to get rid of Thomas and charge his wife. Well, that's what we're waiting for. You know, the superseding indictments coming from the January 6th trial. We're still waiting for the Supreme Court to tell us that Donald Trump does not have absolute immunity, in spite of the fact that they delayed things here by putting the arguments out to April 25th. That's the official day now. In spite of that, there's no way they can give him the absolute immunity he's asking for. If they do that, then, of course, Joe Biden's got immunity, and they'll never offer up that possibility. So he's not going to get the immunity. And when that happens, that's going to be very crushing to him, because that's one of the main defenses in all his criminal trials. You take away that defense, he's got nothing. Well, he has nothing in the first place, but you take away that, he truly has nothing. But of course, Jack Smith only indicted Donald Trump because he knew that was time sensitive, and the others weren't time sensitive. So they wanted to keep it very simple and clean and clear for Donald Trump and get him prosecuted and convicted. But ultimately, we are going to see other indictments. There are going to be sitting members of Congress, people outside Congress that were associates with Donald Trump, people like Ginny Thomas, people like Roger Stone, and they're going to get nailed. There's no question about it. Lila says, where is Ginny? Haven't heard or seen from her in a long time. Yeah, I think Ginny's laying low these days. I don't know if you heard that in Arizona, they're sending out some subpoenas over the fake electors. And that could involve a lot of people in Arizona, obviously. But it could also go as far as Georgia did, where they would send out indictments to the Mark Meadows and the Donald Trumps and some of the others, even Ken Cheesebro. I mean, what you have to understand is what Donald Trump did in Georgia, he also did in Michigan, he also did in Arizona, he also did in Pennsylvania. He could be tied up in state courts for the rest of his life. David says Graham, Greene, Gates too, I hope. Yeah, I think so. How'd you like Marjorie Taylor Greene at the State of the Union address? Wow, she is the tackiest redneck piece of shit I've ever seen. There are rules against wearing hats in the House of Representatives. It's funny, the Speaker of the House, the boss in there, didn't say a fucking word. Some people think he's afraid of Marjorie Taylor Greene. She kind of scares me too, but not in the same way. I'd love to talk to her. I know that wouldn't go well. It'd probably go like that. Did you see the British journalist talking to her? And it ended up by her saying, fuck off, and walking away. This is what happens when you ask them hard questions that they don't want to answer. They know the answers. They just don't want to give the answers because it will show that they're wrong and they're criminal and they're fucking dumb. It would be fun to talk to her, but it probably wouldn't last very long. Lauren Boebert is certainly going to be voted out in 2024. I'm not so sure about Marjorie Taylor Greene, though. She's in Georgia and she has a pretty red district, and it sounds like they're kind of a redneck community and they may just elect her again. But she's got problems, you know. It doesn't seem like anybody likes her. The MAGA fucks don't particularly like her, and of course the normal folks hate her guts, and Democrats can't stand the bitch. She's the least popular girl in high school at this point. David says, I think you're not supposed to wear campaign crap there. She had the hat. Yeah, you're not supposed to wear campaign stuff, but you're not supposed to wear a hat of any kind in the House of Representatives. Don't know why, but that's the case. But will Mike Johnson do anything about it? Of course he won't. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene's done so many fucked up things that she should have been kicked out of the House of Representatives, and they haven't done a fucking thing to her. They haven't done anything to her. To be honest, to have her sitting in a Republican seat doesn't really bother me that much. It's going to be more interesting when she's not in the majority. But as long as she's there, that's just one more seat, one more Republican that can't get shit accomplished. It's better to have her there than somebody who might be competent, that might be formidable to actually go up against. So keep the dumb shit in the seat. Did you see Biden's face when he saw her in that hat? Hysterical. Yeah, Biden's really good with that, in the sense that somebody calls him out or says something to him. He's good with the comebacks. He's very sharp in that sense. And I think Biden was either appalled or surprised and laughing about the way Marjorie Taylor Greene looked. She looked like a fool, but that's nothing new. Lila says she's there to create chaos and that she does that quite well. Absolutely. I mean, they call them the Chaos Caucus, whether it be Freedom Caucus, Chaos Caucus, the MAGA fucks, the Trump fucks, they're all the same. Lila says she's a Trump groupie, and there's no question about that. How sad does it have to be if you're a woman of any age and your dream guy paints himself orange, is overweight, is loud and obnoxious, and frequently shits himself? Wow. It reminds me of the old days in the 60s when they advertised the games. Remember Mystery Date? You'd open the door and there'd be the cute guy, there'd be the surfer, and there would be the dud. Donald Trump is without question the fucking dud for everybody. Cindy says Major Ojeda calls them jackaloons. Yeah, I like that. I call them Trumplefucks, jackaloons, tomatoes, all the same shit. It's funny when he got talking about the border. Joe Biden's talking about the border. That's when the Republicans were booing. And it was interesting that they would boo because the bill that they wanted to pass was largely put together by the Republicans. The Democrats gave in a lot and gave the Republicans everything they wanted because they wanted to get money to Ukraine and Israel. But then they voted it down. Here's the interesting thing. The goofball bitch, Katie, whatever the fuck her name was, the freshman senator that spoke after Joe Biden, she spoke out against the border and how nothing is being done there. What she didn't tell us, though, what she didn't say was that she was one of the ones working on and putting together and negotiating for that bill. She's one of the authors of that bill. And then when that bill came up for a vote in the Senate, she voted against it. So she created a bill, she voted against it, but yet somehow Joe Biden is at fault for the problems of the border. This is where the Republicans really screwed up. Their talking point was Joe Biden leaving the border open. And then they go and not pass this bill. Now they have to take responsibility for not doing anything with the border. And now Joe can say, yeah, I tried, man. Got a great bill. The toughest bill ever. Every talking point that the Republicans had going into this election has been fucked up for them. They said that Joe was a criminal or corrupt and taking bribes. Found out that wasn't true because their star witness lied, and we find out he's an agent of Russia. Not to mention the fact they've never been able to come up with any evidence. So they can't use that. The border was a big one. Joe wanted to do something with the border. He said he'd even shut the border down in some circumstances. Donald Trump said no, so the Republicans said no. Then they try to tell us that Joe Biden is diminished mentally, that he has Alzheimer's or he has dementia. He can't finish a sentence. And then we have what we had last night and blows that out of the water too. So every talking point they have has been blown out of the water by Democrats and or Joe Biden. And that's the unfortunate thing for the Republicans, and another reason why I don't think they can win. They can't win because they don't campaign on any policies. They don't have any strategies. Their only strategy is to try to discredit their opponent, whether it be Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or whoever it is. That's all they do. Now, you don't want to vote for them because they're bad, because they smell kids' hair, or he can't complete a sentence. But then none of it's true. It tells you how hard they're working and how desperate they are to come up with something on Joe Biden, because everything they come up with has no basis in fact. You would think a guy working in Congress for 50 years, being a vice president and now a president, you would think you could find some dirt on a guy like that. I mean, legitimate dirt that you could use. But apparently, the Republicans can't, because they haven't shown us any evidence of any kind of misdeeds by Joe Biden. So they're in a desperation mode. They've got no plans, no policy, no platform. All they can do is try to make Joe Biden look bad, and that's not even working. This is why I say I don't see Donald Trump really doing well in the November election. And honestly, I've said too, I don't think he'll be the nominee. Now, a lot of people get on me about that. Oh, he's going to be the nominee. He's got all the votes. He's gone through the primary. Theoretically and technically, you're right. He should be the nominee based on the primaries and how much support he has from Republicans. However, he's also 77, soon to be 78 years old. And he's got more pressure hanging over his head than any one man could ever fucking handle, even if he was 35 years old. I mean, you think about it. They're taking $600 million away from him. They may end up taking his property. This is devastating to a guy like Donald Trump because his entire identity is his money, power, and property. Then you throw in the 4 indictments in 4 jurisdictions, criminal charges, 91 of them. I mean, Donald Trump has got to be the most prolific criminal of recent times. There are a lot of criminals out there that get a lot of indictments and get a lot of charges, but none of them even close to Donald Trump. So when you think about it, all the money's being taken away. He's going to be in criminal court where he has to sit every fucking day and shut his mouth. He has to listen to all the evidence coming up against him. And then he's going to get convicted of multiple crimes in this court case. And then after that, he has another court case. Then after that, he has another court case. And after that, he has another court case. Not to mention a bunch of various and sundry lawsuits after E. Jean Carroll and Letitia James. This guy is going to be hard pressed to get out of a courtroom between now and November. You know, a lot of people are kind of getting excited about, well, you know, we may not get that Washington, D.C. trial going until July, which would walk it right up to the election. And people are fearful about that. They don't like that. But let me explain this to you. Imagine this. It's July. Donald Trump is in a criminal trial, maybe one of the most devastating criminal trials he's going to have to face regarding the insurrection. From July to October, he's going to be in court every day, all day. He's going to be saying and doing stupid shit. Evidence is going to be exposed. He's going to be in that courtroom every day leading up to the election. How the hell is he going to campaign? How the hell is he going to put together support? He's not. Donald Trump just doesn't have time to be the nominee. He certainly doesn't have the money to be the nominee. So this is why I think he will either be crushed emotionally or physically, and he just won't be able to do it. I mean, any other human being would not be able to handle that. Now, that said, Donald Trump is kind of a cockroach. He does survive a lot. So I'm not saying he won't be the nominee. I just don't think he will. But the good news is, if he is the nominee, I'm cool with that too, because I think Donald Trump is the best possible opponent for Joe Biden. Think about every election where Donald Trump was the face of that election, whether he was the candidate or whether he was endorsing candidates. What happened in all of those? He lost every fucking one of them, every one of them. And he will lose in November of 2024. Page says he just lost the Steele dossier case in UK, Europe too. He owes about 800,000 as of last week, and he has to pay it to the court there. Yep. You remember that story? The Steele dossier? That's the one with all the scandalous and salacious shit that he did while in Russia. You know, the P tape, if you remember. Well, when that came out, the Republicans and Donald Trump kept talking about how it was a lie and it was this and it was that and it was the other thing. So Donald Trump thought he'd be smart, Donald Trump trying to be smart, and he decided to sue Christopher Steele in England. Well, they went to the court case. He was going to bully him and sue him and take all his money. Well, when it got to the judge said, this is absolute bullshit. We're throwing this out. Now, Donnie, you're going to have to pay the cost to your opponent here because you brought him here, forced them to spend a lot of money pointlessly. So, Paige, you're absolutely right. He did lose that. He did lose that case in England. There's something going on in Scotland too. He's got a golf course in Scotland, and since all this news came out about Donald Trump inflating his assets to get better loans, turns out he probably did that in Scotland too. So Scotland is looking into that. He may have troubles over there. I don't know what they can do to him there, but it's certainly not going to make his life any easier when they come out and they try to extract more money from Donald Trump. It should be very interesting. Donald is, David said, oops, Scotland. What did I say? Did I not say Scotland? Yeah, it is Scotland where the course is. And there was a lot of other issues there with how he got the property and who he screwed in the process. This is nothing new for Donald Trump. All this stuff we found out in the Letitia James lawsuit is pretty clear that this is an ongoing habitual thing for Donald Trump. He's been committing these crimes for decades, and just now he's getting caught. Had he not run for president, won the presidency, and just stayed below the radar, he could have probably lived the rest of his life in relative comfort. But no, the ego gets in the way, and he's got to stick his nose in there. And he started playing in a realm that was above his pay rate. You can push around people who work for you. You can push around people who you work with. But when you're dealing with the government, you're not big enough to push around the government. You're not big enough to push around the DOJ. Donald Trump essentially fucked around and found out. Anyhow, of course, we had Super Tuesday earlier this week, and Donald Trump soundly beat Nikki Haley. And Nikki Haley dropped out, as I suggested she might. It's not that she doesn't have the will or the ego to continue. It's just that she doesn't have the money. After losing all those primaries, any money she had has been pulled away from her because, again, people don't want to spend good money after bad money. The whole point of Nikki Haley being in the race wasn't to win the primaries. It was hoping against hope that Donald Trump would keel over or drop out or something. Well, he hasn't done that as yet. She suspended her campaign, and don't be surprised if she crops up sometime down the road if Donald Trump does end up dropping out for whatever reason. but I still don't think she'll be the candidate. She has all the wrong qualities to be a Republican candidate. She's a woman and she's of color and she's born of immigrant parents. Definitely not the candidate the Republicans would normally support. But the interesting thing about it is that in those primary campaigns, as much as he beat um, Nikki Haley pretty soundly, there was like 30 to 40% of the people in the Republican Party that did not vote for Donald Trump, that did vote for Nikki Haley. And there were some exit polls taken after the elections, and a good 25 to 30% of Nikki Haley's voters said they will not now or ever vote for Donald Trump. Now, you see where the problem is there. If you're in the Republican Party, the bare minimum you need is everybody in the Republican Party voting for you, like they did for Donald Trump in 2020. But if they want to win, they need independents and they need some of the moderates and conservatives in the Republican Party. Well, at this point, Donald Trump has lost the independents, pretty much lost the normal Republicans. And now, with all the Republicans that vote for Nikki Haley, 25 to 30% of them saying they won't vote for Donald Trump. So Donald Trump won't get the extras that he needs. He can't even get all of the Republican Party. And if he can't get all of the Republican Party, he can't win. You just can't. The numbers aren't there. They don't make any sense. He can't win at that point. So this is why I have a lot of confidence when I say that Donald Trump will not be the candidate, or at least not win if he is the candidate. As I say, Donald Trump is the candidate. That's a huge gift to Democrats. You're probably wondering why the Republicans continue to embrace Donald Trump, even though he's a sure loser. I'll tell you why. The reason they embrace him is because they know he'll lose the presidential election. But they know if he's not the nominee, there's a good chance all his little Trumplafucks just won't vote at all. They won't come out at all. They can't vote for their Lord and Savior. They're not going to fucking vote. And the problem with that is that if they don't vote for Donald Trump, if they don't come out and vote, they aren't going to vote for the down ballot folks too, the people in the House, the people in the Senate, the governors, the legislators. They're going to lose a lot if Donald Trump's people don't come out. So they're hoping against hope he is the nominee, that he survives long enough to be the nominee, and they're going to continue to embrace him. They almost have to give away the presidential election in hopes of keeping some power in the states and in Congress. That's why they're sticking with this dumb fuck. They've got to be able to try to maintain a little power, and I don't know that they're even going to be able to do that. Kirk Barnes says Putin is paying the bill. Well, kind of. I don't think Putin's at a stage at this point of giving Donald Trump money. I don't think the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, I don't even think Elon Musk is giving him money because there's nothing to be gained there. That said, Putin is probably investing a lot of money in order to try to meddle in the election by way of social media. They did it in 2016. They did it in 2020. And they are most certainly going to do it in 2024. Now, it didn't work in 2020. So, but that's not going to stop him. They have nothing to gain by Biden continuing as president. Vladimir Putin has everything to gain if Donald Trump somehow becomes president. But these people are smart enough. They see what's going on. They know that Donald Trump has no chance at all. So to give him money personally is just a waste. It's just ridiculous. It's not going to happen. David says they're all over Facebook again. Yeah, I see them on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and all of that. I don't see them so much here on YouTube, so that's good news. But the fact is that have you heard this story of how everybody's freaking out on TikTok? that they're going to shut down TikTok in the United States. Yeah, the Republicans in Congress really have a hard on for TikTok. Why do you suppose that is? Well, I'll tell you why. On TikTok, um, there's a lot of talk, and here on YouTube too, but YouTube's been around for such a long time. They're kind of a mainstay. The big thing is they see TikTok is somehow connected to the Chinese government and that they're all spying on us. They know what we're doing. They're stealing our secrets. Okay. What's also happening with TikTok is things like what I'm doing and other people like me are doing. We're spreading actual truth. We're not spreading the bullshit that the media wants us to consume. They want us scared. They want us nervous. And they don't like the fact that we know things that we know now by way of TikTok. So, of course, the government would like to shut that down. In addition to that, the big players to shut TikTok down are Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk with Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. They want to shut down TikTok. And you know why? Because TikTok is kicking their ass. It's far more successful than those other three apps. And they don't like the competition. So what they do is they take their billions of dollars, spread it around a little bit in Congress, get their lobbyists going, and get these people wired up to shut down TikTok. They want to kill the competition. This is why they want to take down TikTok. Now, people are saying to me, are you worried that they're going to take down TikTok? Not really. I'm not worried that they're going to take down TikTok. If you remember, we went through this one time before. Everybody was up in arms and worried and crying, oh, they're going to shut down TikTok. But did they shut down TikTok? No. Problem with TikTok is there are millions and millions and millions of people on TikTok, a lot of younger folks on TikTok. And those younger folks are voting. And the Republicans already have problems with the young people on TikTok, or young people that are voters. They can't pull them into the fold and get their votes. And if you're going to piss them off by taking away their favorite app, that's not going to help matters much when it comes to trying to get them or convince them to vote for you. You got the whole First Amendment thing. There's a lot of things that are going to happen. I don't see TikTok going down. It's possible, I guess. The reason I'm not worried about it either is that I'm really starting to feel more home on YouTube. I like that YouTube is kind of stable. I don't have the kind of following here on YouTube that I do on TikTok, but it's never been about how many followers I have. If I've got an audience of any kind, and I get a fair audience on YouTube, that's all I need. It doesn't have to be 300,000 like on TikTok. It could be virtually anything, as long as we're getting the word out to people who then get it out to other folks. That's the important thing. Paige says, night chat. I can't stay awake any longer. Mike amazes me. I never miss an episode he puts out, and I'm glad I caught alive and looking forward to more before the election. Well, have a good night, Paige. And actually, I'm going to have to, I told myself I'd do an hour here. When you're old like me, after an hour, you got to go to the bathroom, you fall asleep, you start talking like Donald Trump and slurring and shit. So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to probably wrap it up here too. And I want to thank all you folks for showing up. I did this at drop of the hat. I thought about it at the last minute and said, I'm going to do it. And I appreciate you folks paying attention and showing up and being part of this, because it makes it all so much easier when I have the interaction. If you listen to the podcast, I have a lot of emails. I have listeners that come on the show, and that makes everything a lot more interesting, a lot more informative. I count on you folks to show up and be part of the program. So I'll remind you, I have a podcast that comes out every night right after midnight. There's an audio version of it. You can get the links to that and all the other things I'm doing at rationalboomer.com. It's basically a link tree. Go to rationalboomer.com and you'll find all the links. And of course, the podcast is also here on YouTube. It's very easy to find. Just do whatever you do when you're looking for whatever you're looking for on YouTube. Put in Rational Boomer, and there we are. Every night we have a podcast, and in a couple of hours, hour and a half or so, a new podcast is coming out, and this one is with Ed. If you've never heard Ed before, you'll want to check this one out. Smart guy, makes the show that much better. So, all of you, thank you very much for taking the time to join me here. I'm going to do this some more, I think. I'd like to do it more because I like the interaction with the folks. I hope you have a great night. Check out the podcast, and don't worry, I'm going to keep talking between now and the election and beyond, because even after the election, we've got a lot of shit we've got to address. So have a great night, and I will talk to you soon.